Yeah, I mean, honestly, we love the feedback. So first of all, for anyone watching this, if you have feedback, we love to hear it. So please do keep sharing it in the channels that you
Okay,
do.
sure. 네, 여러분 반갑습니다. 에러입니다. 오늘 제가 굉장히 유명한 분을 모시고 왔습니다. 바로 구글 딥마인드의 디렉터 분이시죠. 툴시 도시라고 하는 분이신데, 제가 작년에 구글 I/O 2025에서 이제 데비스 하사비스 다음에 바로 발표하신 굉장히 유명하시고 유튜브에서도 활동을 하시지만도 제미나이 관련된 프로덕트라던가 다양한 서비스들을 총 책임하고 계신 분입니다. 오늘 여기에 대해서 굉장히 관심이 많으실 것 같아서 제가 직접 여러 가지 질문을 던지면서 한번 여쭤보고 인사이트를 가지는 시간 가져보도록 하겠습니다. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Error in YouTube channel Unreal Tech.
So nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Could you please introduce yourself for our channel viewers?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Tulsee, and I lead the product team for our Gemini and generative AI models here at Google DeepMind.
To kick things off, knowing that many of our viewers are already familiar with your work, actually, and how would you describe your current role specifically and identify in your own words?
So the way I think about my job is if you think of the model as a product, right? So the model is something that every user, hopefully in the world, will experience in some way. You might experience it in the Gemini app or in Google search or in another product that uses Gemini. And so my job as the product lead for these models is to think about what capabilities should they have? How do they meet the needs of users in different places? And how do we make sure that we build the best models to be able to help different people across the world get amazing things done?
Okay, great. In these days, Google, after Gemini 3.0 Pro and Flash, and with some kind of TPU things, all of the interests focused on the Google net right now. So many subscribers and viewers are very interested about it. So many people still see Gemini as just a single chatbot in usual the public. But it has expanded into an ecosystem, including the app, AI Studio, or Google Labs. So how do you internally align these into one coherent strategy? And what is the specific goal for each of these user groups in the spectrum like Google?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things, so we're really excited about the idea that you can experience Gemini everywhere. So for the everyday user, we want Gemini to be your helpful assistant, right? We want it to be a collaborator. We want it to be able to, for anyone, to be able to work with Gemini to learn, plan, create. We had this line when Gemini 3 released about being able to build anything. So we want any person in the world to be able to build anything with Gemini. Then you have developers, right? We want also developers to be able to use Gemini to build faster, to build more robustly, to be able to really drive their daily workflows in useful ways. And so we really want to build out, for all types of users, Gemini as this collaboration source. With our Google Labs surface, really what we're trying to do is experiment and push the boundaries, if you will, of what's possible, right? So for example, if you take a product like Notebook LM, which I personally really love, it's an example of what we build in labs where we try to take the models and see what kind of new creative use cases we can build with them. And those hopefully either become amazing use cases for developers or for consumers. And we can kind of scale them that way.
I also like the Google Notebook LM. When I first used this, what is it? This is what I want. Speaking of Google Labs, what are the specific criteria or some kind of trust thresholds that determine when a feature is ready or we can release to the public? Is there any kind of criteria or standard?
Yeah, I mean, not just in Google Labs, right? So across any launch we do with Gemini, safety and trust is super important. And I like to think that we think about it from day one when we're building the model. So when we're building the model from the beginning, we sort of ask ourselves, okay, what needs to be true from a safety standpoint? And we have metrics that we evaluate every step of the way to make sure that the model is meeting our policies, that the model has been evaluated for all of the right safety concerns, and only then do we launch it to our larger set of users. So that's actually super important. We also have this framework we call the Frontier Safety Framework, and that Frontier Safety Framework really looks at these more critical risks and critical capability levels like cyber attack or bio or nuclear. And we always, again, make sure that as we develop new models, we evaluate those models according to that framework so that we can make sure that they are in fact safe to put out to the public. So whether it's a Google Labs project or whether we're shipping a new model in Gemini app or whether we're shipping a new model to the API, safety is super important.
So now we are going to the most popular parts, Gemini 3 Pro and Flash.
Yeah,
Flash.
we love Gemini 3 Pro and Flash.
So Gemini 3 Pro and Flash, they have very distinct personalities. So as the product owner, how did you define their roles? Was the focus on accuracy for Pro and speed for the Flash? Usually we divide into the two categories, or deliberate decision based on user use cases. What can you say?
So Gemini 3 Pro and Flash, so in general, actually, maybe taking a step back, with Gemini, our goal is to create a family of models. And the idea is that different models might be used by different users for different use cases, right? So for example, there are some users who really just want powerhouse reasoning because they're doing complicated tasks. Maybe they're doing complicated coding or a very complex agentic workflow, or maybe they're really trying to understand a very long video in a lot of detail. And in all of those cases, they might just be willing to have a slower or more expensive model, but that can actually perform at this very, very high quality bar. So they're thinking about that performance trade-off. You might have users who are maybe actually wanting to do speech-to-speech translation. Maybe I'm trying to talk to the model and have the model translate for me. In which case, speed kind of matters, right? I don't want to wait for a long time before I get an answer. And so there, maybe I actually care more about low latency, right? Or I care about how fast the model responds. And so we want to give users the opportunity to use different models for different use cases and different tasks, and to make sure that the model does those tasks well. So we think about Gemini 3 Pro is really our powerhouse model, right? It's defined for complex reasoning where you really want that best performance. You really want to be able to build, for example, amazing coding applications. Gemini 3 Flash is really meant to be for your everyday workflow. It's the model you can talk to every day, where maybe speed matters, where maybe cost efficiency matters. You want to do something real time. You want to iterate really quickly. Those are things where Flash is going to be really awesome. And so we really want to make sure we think about the fact that different users need different things, and we want Gemini to meet those goals.
There is a common intuition in the AI community that faster models are inherently riskier, this feels like. So when designing Flash, what specific risk concerned you most, and how did you ensure that efficiency didn't come at the cost of safety?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, yes, efficiency can definitely not come at the cost of safety. I actually don't know that I fully agree with the idea that faster models are inherently riskier. I think that, like I said earlier, for us, safety is something we look at throughout the model life cycle. And so it's something we evaluate constantly. We look at the things like the frontier safety framework. We look at kind of our core policies. And so Flash was also designed with that in mind, to make sure that when we release the model, we do so in a way that is safe and that really works for users. And I think, that's something that's going to continue to be a huge priority.
Next question is, from a product standpoint, how do you distinguish between an answer that is simply good and one that is true trustworthy? How does Google define hallucinations within your quality framework?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think, first of all, it is super important for us to also be thinking about factuality. And that is a use case we also care very deeply about. I think it's important for us to have evaluations, like I said earlier, for safety, for us to have evaluations for factuality as well. And so, in fact, we actually have externally this benchmark we released called the FACTS benchmark that we released externally, and that measures different types of factuality, right? It measures how well does the model able to use its own knowledge? How well is the model able to ground on other information? How well is the model able to use the context you gave it correctly? And all of those things are versions of factuality that really matter, that we really want to make sure that the model we continue to improve on. And so within our quality framework, that's a space that we're very much measuring and then hoping to continue to improve.
Okay, thank you. I prepared some other questions, but you already answered all of them.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's great. Okay, about the benchmark, sometimes the model score high on the benchmark, but users still feel there is trust gap in real world usage. So how do you identify these gaps, and what advice do you have for investors or users on how to interpret benchmark scores responsibly?
I really love this question because benchmarks are both extremely valuable, but also very specific, right? So if I go look at a specific benchmark for, let's say, reasoning, that will tell me something about the model, but it won't tell me everything about the model. And so there's two things I think that are important, right? One is you need to actually look at a diversity of evals. If you look at only one benchmark or two benchmarks, you're only going to get one slice of view. So if I want the model, for example, to have very strong multimodal understanding, but I also want the model to be good at coding, I also want to think about factuality or safety, I need to look across a range of evals. The other piece is, I think, as you asked in your question, just a benchmark by itself doesn't measure how a user might experience the model in the real world. And so there is no replacement for running real live experiments with users, for getting user feedback, for addressing user feedback. And so one thing we do before we release any of our models is we actually test our models with customers, we test our models with our users, we ask our users for feedback, and that allows us to figure out where maybe is the benchmark looking good, but actually it's weird for users. So that's like a different piece of the puzzle that I think is super important. And so when you ask about like, what is your advice, for example, investors, I think it's that, you look at the benchmarks, they will tell you something, but always take a step back and say, okay, how are people actually using the model? Where is it being used? And what information do we have about how they're using it? Because that also will tell you a lot about how the model is performing in the real world, independent of just benchmarks themselves.
Okay, next question. What are the most frequent pieces of feedback you hear from users and the Gemini app versus developers in AI Studio? How directly does this feedback change your engineering roadmap or model update priorities?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we love the feedback. So first of all, for anyone watching this, if you have feedback, we love to hear it. So please do keep sharing it in the channels that you do.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I think it's actually been really helpful to get feedback. So we get feedback in many different ways, right? Sometimes we get feedback in the context of a product. So for example, in the Gemini app, users can thumbs up or thumbs down a response, and that's a form of feedback. That's users telling us whether they liked a response or didn't like a response. Sometimes we get feedback directly from a customer who will say, hey, here's how we use the model, and here's what we liked, or here's what we didn't like. Sometimes we'll get feedback more from, what people are saying on social media, or we'll get feedback in other ways. And each of those pieces of feedback is super valuable. We take it in, we debug it, we triage it, we prioritize it, and then we start folding it into our model roadmap. So for example, we will hear from consumers in the app maybe that, hey, like here's a common theme where we're seeing people doing thumbs down. Maybe they're not actually enjoying the way that the product is doing something in particular. Then that's great for us. We can go and follow up. So like one of the things we had heard at one point was around, how the model's tone or personality or persona was sort of reflecting. And we've done a lot of work since then to be really intentional about the model's personality and tone and style, and to continue to try to improve that based on user feedback.
It might be a very interesting topic. So looking at the broader AI landscape, where do you expect the battleground to be most intense in the next year or this year? Is it raw performance or lowering costs or the elimination of hallucinations? Which part do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of interesting is like the space changes so fast that when you say a year, I expect, we're going to see so much evolve over the course of the year. But right now, if you ask me kind of like where the battleground is, I really do think it is in these like agentic complex workflows. And so I see it as how can we set up these amazing workflows that allow users to do multi-hour tasks with really complex tool calls that actually can help in, coding, but can also help in finance or can help in legal or can help in, any domain that you might be interested in. And I think that's where we're going to see us moving from just kind of raw performance to moving to these really high utility kind of use cases and really trying to help people become more productive. And as we're able to do that, that's where the battleground is really going to take place. And I think for us, one thing we're excited about is both pushing on that frontier while still pushing on like the cost and the latency and the efficiency frontier, so that ideally we build models that are both very, very useful for these tasks, but also in a way that is effective from like a time and cost perspective.
Okay, finally, I got this question. This is not a on the list question, but anyway, what do you think? What is the ultimate goal of the Google DeepMind or Google in the field of AI? And next is, what is your goal for achieving these kind of goals?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start with my goal because that's, I think, very clear for me. And then I can talk a little bit about Google DeepMind. I think for me, the value of building amazing AI is to build truly amazing personal collaborators. I think that what we can do is really improve people's productivity. We can democratize access, right? So I think I said this in a different interview a couple weeks ago. My family speaks Gujarati, which is a language that has like historically not been very prevalent on the web. Imagine what you can do if you can create more and more content in Gujarati that more and more people around the world can actually read, right? Or engage with. Imagine what you can do with audio models where people, where there isn't literacy, can actually engage with this information and get high quality information. Imagine what you can do if you can save time from so many tasks to be able to actually free up time for more creativity and human creativity and value. And so I think there's so much that AI can provide in terms of really enriching both access and productivity. And I'm personally really, really excited about what we can do and what Google DeepMind can do to like really build that future. And I think if you ask then what is the Google DeepMind goal, I like to think this parallels the Google DeepMind goal as well, but also it's the path to AGI, right? To really truly building amazing intelligence. And I think what we're building these amazing resources for users and for people is one way on that path to intelligence as well. And so I think we're trying to do both of those things.
Okay. Unfortunately, our time is up. Time really flies. Tulsee, thank you for being so transparent and open with your answers. It was like genuine privilege to host you on your tech. And for my reviewers, could you say something like you want to say to all the subscribers or viewers? Anything?
I mean, first of all, I really enjoyed talking to Unreal Tech to Error. For everyone watching, if you have not tried Gemini yet, please do. You can go to the Gemini app and try it. You can go to AI Studio and try it. You can go to search and try it. And we hope that you're getting awesome value out of Gemini.
I usually watch your video like Google or like Google for Developers YouTube channels. So any other like channels you or arrange?
I think though, like definitely watch Google for Developers. It's a great channel. If you haven't watched the Release Notes podcast, I would definitely recommend it. It's a podcast that Logan Kilpatrick hosts, which I get to join from time to time. But it's a great way to learn about what we're building at Gemini and why we're building it and what the latest and greatest is.
I'll put those links in the description below. Okay, thank you very much. 네, 지금까지 인터뷰 마무리했는데요. 어떠셨습니까? 저는 굉장히 인사이트 있는 시간이었는데요. 이렇게 마무리하고 또 계속 지속해서 디렉터님께서 얘기해 주신 내용들도 안될공학 채널에서 계속 다루도록 하겠습니다. 지금까지 에러였습니다.